right. So, welcome to Get Health with Dr. Cooper podcast. And today I have a very special guest with me. I'm a board certified internal medicine doctor and I love holistic approach to health. And I have a registered dietitian, Marla, who has the total package, the total experience. So I want to welcome you, Marla, to Get
Thank
Healthy
you.
with Dr. Cooper.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here with you today.
Good, good. Marla, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what have you been doing?
So let's see, who am I? I was actually brought up in the Midwest, and I was brought up to eat a very heavy meat and potatoes diet. So to a lot of my friends and family, it's a big surprise that I'm a plant-based dietitian now. I became semi-vegetarian in college after actually biting into a half-cooked or really an uncooked hamburger, and that was it for me on red meat. And I started realizing that I was feeling better, not eating so much meat. Anyhow, when I fast forward to getting my second degree, when I graduated from UT Southwestern with my dietetics degree, unfortunately, I became ill that last semester, and it took quite a long time to become diagnosed. But eventually, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And by that time I was vegan, but, semi-healthy, semi-junk food vegan. And eventually I realized that, if I was really going to optimize my own health, which I felt it was important to do that to be able to treat other people, that I needed to jump in all the way. And that's when I started looking at whole food plant-based eating. And that's when I decided to become board certified in lifestyle medicine. Dr. Cooper, there's so much information out there to support this style of eating. The data just can't be denied. And I'm thrilled that I myself am whole food plant-based and that I manage my health this way, because I really would never want to ask my patients to do something that I have not already been willing to do. So I'm very careful to walk the talk with them. And that, and to let them know, it can be a slow journey, a quick journey. Everybody comes to it differently, but I can help them along their way.
Very good. So you said you were not always plant-based and that you had an autoimmune disease, you had Crohn's disease, and you changed your lifestyle to becoming a plant-based whole food person, and you saw the change.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, I'm 19 years into this now, and for short periods of time, I'm able to come off medications, but I'm basically on the same medication they put me on when I was diagnosed. And you don't usually see that with autoimmune disease. You usually see a progression of the disease and having to go on much stronger medications. And I haven't needed to do that. And I attribute that to my diet and lifestyle.
Let's talk a little bit about Crohn's disease. I mean, you are a patient. Now, what were the symptoms you had that led you to seek medical attention?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. The first thing I actually noticed, which is going to sound strange, was joint pain. And I did not know at the time that small joint pain, it was a symptom of Crohn's. And after that came the fatigue. I was anemic, and the diarrhea. I mean, try being on rotation in a hospital, seeing patients all day long and having to run to the bathroom at the same time, So I started learning where all the bathrooms were in every building. Eventually, I had lost so much weight, my hair was coming out, and it was actually the doctor who, where I had started my private practice. I started my private practice within a doctor's office, and she looked at me one day and she said, "You don't look good. You should go to a doctor." And so she connected me with a GI specialist. I kind of told her what was happening with me, and took a while to get in, took a while to get a colonoscopy, and then there it was. And I feel like, gee, I studied Crohn's, but I didn't self-diagnose, right? Um, so I was surprised, but I was a little bit relieved. At least it was something that wasn't completely rare. There were medications, and like I said, then I started really looking a lot closer at my diet and my lifestyle to try to help.
Very good. Now tell me, what did you change in your diet and lifestyle that positively impacted your Crohn's disease?
Absolutely. I looked at the amount of processed food I was eating that had high omega-6 fatty acids in them. I looked at the amount of omega-3 fatty acids that I was getting, which was close to none. So I changed that ratio. I stayed away from fried foods. I added a lot more leafy greens. My diet wasn't too bad. One doctor said to me, they think that the reason why I was being diagnosed with Crohn's at an age that people aren't typically diagnosed with was that I had been modifying my diet as I went to help myself feel better. So
Mhm.
by the time I was diagnosed, I was eating fairly healthy, but there were still changes to be made. I looked into eating raw foods, more raw foods that were very anti-inflammatory. And it actually wasn't until I started incorporating more raw foods that the joint pain went away. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah, and then the way I manage stress, oof, and my sleep habits. Those 2 things were other things that I really needed to work on quite a bit.
Very good. So you change your diet, incorporating more plant food, whole food, raw foods.
Mhm,
You change your sleeping. You started to get more rest
mhm.
and you started to manage your stress. So all three of these habits, new habits that you incorporated, they have anti-inflammatory benefits.
Correct.
And I believe that's why your disease process improved. Now, when you changed your diet and you started incorporating more fruits and veggies, raw foods, removing the processed food, what changed first? What change did you notice? You said something about the joint pain, but
Yeah.
expand a little bit on that and the GI symptoms.
Sure. So I was getting very frustrated with the joint pain because I felt like the GI symptoms were fairly well and taken care of. I will say once I went on a whole food plant based diet, bowel movements become easy, solid. Because I rarely would become constipated, but the diarrhea could be an issue. So eating a whole food plant based diet and changing up some details of it really helped my bowels to just be regular. No more
Mhm.
chasing off to find the bathroom. No more urgency first thing in the morning, jumping out of bed and running down the hall. But the joint pain was the last thing to go. And that's when I decided, I've been reading a lot about raw diets and I had asked about them at a conference I was at. And the answer I'd gotten was, they didn't think it was necessary for the general public. And I thought,
Mhm.
well, let me try it because again, I want to walk the talk. And before I ask any of my patients to incorporate more raw foods, I should try it. So I found a little program that was 3 weeks and I started it. And in 5 days, this joint pain that I had had for 10 years at least was gone. And I don't want to sound too like it was a miracle or anything, but I mean, I should wake up in the morning and not have to ask my husband, rub my hands hurt. They didn't hurt. So
Mhm.
the more I studied it, the more I realized it's just the most anti-inflammatory way to eat that there is. Now, was it completely sustainable for me? Not really. So now I just incorporate more raw foods into my diet and I kind of know what my threshold is between raw and cooked.
So if somebody's listening to us, they probably have other autoimmune disease. They
Mhm.
probably have Crohn's or anything.
Right.
Um, how do you advise them to incorporate more raw food? What would you say to them? And you're a dietitian, so you're counseling patients every single
That's
day.
right. That's right. So for my autoimmune disease patients, and I see patients with MS and lupus and ulcerative colitis and all kinds of autoimmune diseases. Unfortunately, they're on the rise. We start out by incorporating a green smoothie. And
Mhm.
I mean, I love my green
That's
smoothies. I can show you, I have my little glass full right here that I was sipping
nice.
on before the interview. I love my green smoothies, and they're a fantastic way to get more omega-3 fatty acids in, which again are anti-inflammatory. So we can pack that blender container full of greens and omega-3 fatty acid seeds like chia seeds and flax seeds and hemp seeds, and add just enough fruit to make it taste good.
Mhm.
Um, and blend that up in a good high-speed blender and just kind of snack on it throughout the day, or have it as a meal replacement. And that is where I start with my autoimmune people because no matter where where their diet is, if it's the standard American diet or if it's slightly a little bit more healthy, that green smoothie is going to be a big hit of anti-inflammatory foods that they're probably not already getting. And it's an easy way to get it.
Yes, I agree to that. I think I always tell my patients also to do the same thing. If you don't like vegetables, just pack the veggies in a smoothie and drink it.
That's right.
Because when you blend the veggies, you're not juicing the vegetables, you're blending. So you're getting the fiber
Right.
and you're getting all the antioxidant, all the nutrients you're getting, and
Keep
you're
that.
ensuring that you get it, once.
That's
And as
right.
you mentioned, all the fatty acids. that you need, omega-3s, you just add those in with by nuts or seeds, chia seed, flax seeds, whatever seeds, you can add those in. So that's a really, really good way. Because if you say, okay, make half your plate vegetables, which we should do, fruits
Sure.
and veggies,
Right.
they may not, want to do that, right? But to really get a high dose of the nutrients and to get that raw, because we know, you and I know that cooking the veggies, heat can destroy some of those nutrients.
That's
So it's better to have a lot of raw
yeah.
than cooked. And if some of them you have to cook, but you should slightly
Right.
cook.
Right.
Now, you see patients on a daily basis,
I sure do.
right? Now, I focus also on obesity and
Mhm.
diabetes.
Yes.
How do you advise someone who is obese or who's diabetic on transitioning into this plant-based or even plant-dominant lifestyle?
So, during the initial assessment, I'm going to do a full health and diet history so I can kind of see where the patient's at to begin with.
Mhm,
And then I tell them a little bit about my background and how I worked with all types of patients and saw that, if we gave patients some very small attainable goals, they would meet those goals, feel good about it, and they would have, they were easy to meet goals. They would have some small results and they would come for follow up 3 to 6 months later and they would have reverted back to all their old behaviors. And what I determined after a certain amount of time was they were not really truly motivated by these small little changes. They might lose a few pounds, their cholesterol goes down 10 points. Looks
mhm,
good on paper, but they're not feeling it, right?
mhm,
So I want them to feel it. And so I talk about more intense therapeutic lifestyle changes and how
mhm,
these type of lifestyle changes really help us to feel better right away, within weeks. And if they can kind of go there with me, commit to 30 days, 60 days of dietary changes, then I'm willing to jump right in with them.
mhm.
And then I ask them about their readiness for change. And so they say, gee, I think I got to take it stepwise. I say, great, let's jump in. We'll start. I have had other patients who say, yeah, tell me what to do. Let's get it done. So it depends on the patient and where they're at. And, I'll guide them depending on what they're ready for. But I do let them know that in order to really feel it and feel it quickly and be motivated by those changes, by those results, it's better to jump right in.
I agree. I agree. So even with my patients that I see, if they're not ready for the change, it doesn't matter what we do, it's not going to work. So I
That's
will
right.
also assess the readiness for change. And a
That's
lot of patients like to hear stories like your story.
uh
How do I know that what the doctor is saying works?
That's right.
So they want to hear your story. And I'll sometimes share stories with patients. So in terms of a diabetic patient,
Uh-huh.
even my case, I'll put the patient on this plant-based whole food diet. And within 48 hours, 72 hours, the sugar is low. The sugars
Right.
drop immediately. Why? Because we've removed the inflammatory food, we've removed the highly dense carbohydrate dense food and plant food, like just say the smoothie that you like to drink, the green smoothie.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's calorie poor, but nutrient dense,
Right.
not a lot of carbs in it.
That's right.
Yes. So a patient who may be struggling with obesity and diabetes, one of the fastest way for them is to really get them to change their lifestyle.
That's so true. And when somebody comes to me like that, I always want to be sure to educate them, hopefully during the initial assessment, about the actual root cause of type 2 diabetes
Mhm,
and make sure that they understand the ins and outs of insulin resistance because everybody is told count your carbs, don't eat carbs, you know, and really the cause of the insulin resistance, as you know, is that fat accumulation in the cells that keeps insulin from doing the job of clearing the glucose from the blood. And when that's happening, there's just no way around it. Our glucose is going to be high. So, and for the patient to understand that fat can come from a meal or it can come from their own stores. And
mm,
so once they understand that and they realize that, fruit and vegetables are not the enemy anymore, then it's a little bit easier for them to start to change. But a lot of people have had that idea about how bad carbs are, drilled into them so deeply that it's a little bit harder for them to trust. But I can tell them about different patients. I mean, I had, for example, I had a young man in his mid-30s come to me. He had had blood work done 6 months before he came to me, and his A1C was in the pre-diabetic range, but nobody said anything to him. So he saw that on there, but he didn't really know what it meant. Then they told him to come back in 6 months. He had blood work done again. And then they said, oh, now you're diabetic. And his A1C was 9.2. And he was like, wait, what? He did not understand what was happening. Again, young guy, mid-30s, 300 pounds, right? Definitely obese, and a single dad with a little girl. So he came to me about a year ago. It was right before the holidays. And he said, I got to make a change. I got to make a change. I don't know what to do. I got to be here for my daughter. I got to turn this around. They want to put me on meds. I don't want to go on meds. And so we started talking, and he was shocked by what I told him. And I said, listen, go watch a couple of movies and come back next week. And so it was the week before Christmas. He came back and he said, okay, I want to do this, but I have to go home for Christmas, and I don't want my family to know anything's wrong with me. I don't want to worry my mom. So I said, okay. He said, so I'm going to make the changes right when I get back. And I thought, all right, and I was doubtful. I thought, really, is he really ready? Sure enough, he sees me the week between Christmas and New Year's. He says, okay, I'm ready. Okay. So we start brainstorming on meal planning. What does he like? What does he not like? What can he make? And he jumped right in. By April, his A1C was down to 6.2. Not quite in the normal range yet, but a big improvement from 9.2, right? He had lost 35 pounds. And his total cholesterol, which had been high when he started at 229, was 152. And his LDL went from 148 to 86. Now,
Fantastic.
this was a patient who said, I'm not afraid of change. I have motivation. I have a reason to do this. I'm going to jump right in.
Right.
So,
So that's
yeah.
a different mindset. But I like the fact that you brought in insulin resistance, you brought in obesity to diabetes, because they're actually the same. It's not necessarily the carbs, but it's the fat. And that is why I didn't coin it, but one of my emphasis is diabesity. Okay.
Yes.
It's diabetes because of obesity. And in your patient's case, the patient's A1C now was 9 point something. He was over 300 pounds. He came to you because he was ready for change.
Yes.
You guided him. He lost 30 something pounds,
Yep.
and his A1C went down to 6.2. Still pre-diabetic, but not 9. So
Right.
there's so many people out there who are either pre-diabetic or diabetic undiagnosed, or patients who are having hormonal issue because of obesity. As healthcare providers, dietitians, our job is to educate and to teach. It's not only just putting a pill on the prescription in terms of the medical providers, but it's really to take the patient into another mindset.
That's right.
You don't necessarily need to be on medication for the rest of your life, but if you were to change your lifestyle, correct the root cause, then the outcome would be different.
Right.
Okay. What other experiences you want to share? I'm going to be open-ended for you to just speak to the audience.
So another patient came to me that I'm thinking about who you mentioned medication. She was being put on her 4th blood pressure medication. She was obese. She had become pre-diabetic, and they wanted to start her on metformin, and her cholesterol was high, and they wanted to start her on a statin. And she was about 50 years old, and she'd had it with all the medication. She said, I never feel good, and I think it's time to make a change. So again, I told her about my background, and she knew about my background when she came to me. She had been referred to me by another patient. And so she said right off the bat, I know that you're a plant-based dietitian, but I'm just telling you right now, I'm not going to be vegan. I'm not going to be I'll eat some more fruit or something, but I'm not going to do it. Wow. Okay. But you came to me anyhow. So I had to think about, why did she come to me anyhow? And so we talked, I did the history, we talked some more. And then towards the end of the session, we did a little pros and cons, right? Pros and cons of you sticking with the types of foods that you're eating now. What is that going to look like? Pros and cons of switching it up. And again, I presented it to her with, give me 30 days, give me 60 days, give me a small time frame. There's no rule that says you cannot go back to doing exactly what you're doing now. She kind of went off and said, well, I'll think about it. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. She comes back and I'm expecting resistance at this point. So I'm ready to kind of, work through some of these
Mhm.
things. And she says, let me just stop you. She says, I haven't had any meat since we met 2 weeks ago. I went over the pros and cons list with my kids and they said, Mom, you got to do this. You got to try it and see what happens. So once she had her kids on board, she was
Mhm.
like, okay, let's do it. I'm ready. Help me decide what to do. Now, so that's somebody who came to me very highly resistant and then decided to give it a chance. She came off all 4 of the blood pressure medications, lost about 30 pounds, never did have to go on the metformin or the statin. All her numbers were within normal limits. Took about 8 months. Took about eight
Mhm.
months for that to happen. Now, I've had other patients who are a little bit more resistant. They make smaller changes, they get the smaller results. And sometimes they're satisfied with those results and they say, thank you so much. And away they go. And, you know, I always wish that they would come back and go the distance with me, but each person's threshold is different. And if they come to me resistant and we are able to make good progress and they can kind of see some habits that are helping them and they've made some changes, that's all we can ask for.
Sure, truly, truly. So
Yeah.
I know you are a holistic dietitian.
Uh,
You deal with lifestyle medicine. So it's not only nutrition,
that's
but
right.
what are the other health habits you emphasize with your patients in order to get them to do well and
Yes.
become healthier?
Yeah. So, well, with all my patients, really, but for sure with people with diabetes, I want them to move their bodies. They
Mhm.
don't have to join a gym and go so many hours a week to the gym. That's very uncomfortable for some people. If they have a neighborhood in which they can walk safely, encourage them greatly to walk. If they work in an office, I encourage them to take a 10-minute walk after they have lunch, to take a 10, 15, 20-minute walk in the evening after they have dinner. Help get the blood sugar to go into the muscles and get used for energy and to decrease your blood sugar before you go to bed at night. So moving your body and knowing that you don't have to run marathons to get in shape. Although I do have a young patient with an autoimmune disease, she's lost 100 pounds. She is having to switch off of her strong medication to a less strong medication. She's worried about it. She just ran her first 5K this fall. And it was something she introduced me to an app that gets you ready for a 5K. I said, I'm going to do it with you. And we did it together. And I have not run a 5K yet. I think I'm going to run one in February, but she ran her first 5K and she said, I didn't get the time that I wanted, but I finished it and I feel pretty good. And it was a huge celebration for both of us. So, and yeah, moving their bodies, seeing what they can do, seeing what they're capable of. Um, and again, you've got to start people where they're at. If they can sit in a chair and use one of these
Mhm.
little pedal cycles in front of them, then that's what they can do. So everybody's going to start where they are, but walking is really good, like I said, for people with diabetes, of course. And then for managing stress as well. And
Mhm.
stress management is another pillar in lifestyle medicine. So it's another area that we address. And exercise can often help alleviate stress.
Mhm.
So it's a win-win there. Another option for managing stress that I like to introduce is meditation. Some people think, oh, you have to put aside a half an hour, 40 minutes to meditate. And people say, oh, I don't have that kind of time. I was lucky enough to go see a lifestyle medicine doctor a few years back, and she introduced me to what's called a 2-minute meditation. And you just set the timer on your phone for 2 minutes and you get in your position and you start the breathing and you do it for 2 minutes. And I would say that most people have 2 minutes in their life to do this. It gets you breathing again. It gets your mind to relax. And I was the last person on earth who I thought would take to meditation. But once I did the 2-minute meditation, I really liked it. And then I've continued to explore it. Exercise, stress management, sleep. We talk about and sleep. I share with my patients, it's still the hardest pillar for me. I still am working at it. So, I want them to know, I don't have this all down either. It's a work in progress, right? But having a bedtime routine, getting away from screens at least an hour or two before bedtime. And that's a bit of an uphill battle with people, right? So I say, okay, at least if you have to be looking at a screen, make sure it's a screen that you can control the blue light and put that blue light filter on, but have that regular routine, have the regular bedtime on the weekends. Don't stray away from that regular bedtime by more than an hour. Um, and, try to go to bed, try to get that 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night uninterrupted. If their sleep is interrupted by different things, then we work on that, whether it's their environment or the need to use the restroom, different things like that. But sleep is so important. And so let's see, what else do I work on with them? I also work on avoidance of risky substances, which for some people, oh, they don't want to go there with me, right? But I do talk about, if you don't drink, don't start. If you are drinking, let's talk about that. What can we do to help you enjoy the time that you would normally enjoy with a glass of wine in your hand? How would you enjoy that doing something else? Anyhow, we look at it, we talk about it. If the patient is not ready to go there, I give them a little bit more background about alcohol and the tie-in with various cancers. I might send them a link to some research so that they can look at it on their own. And hopefully then they'll come back and say, I looked it over and I'm going to cut back. Or
Mhm.
sometimes they're motivated to cut back a lot. And that's always nice. So, and then, I always have to ask the question too, other than alcohol, are there other control substances? Do you smoke pot? Is there anything else? And, these days with marijuana being legal in different places and the availability of these different gummies, I have more patients than I would like to admit who come to me and say, yeah, I do smoke pot. I do use the gummies. So again, that's another topic to discuss with them, how that impacts their food choices, how it in fact impacts their ability to exercise,
Mhm.
and we can see what we can do with it. So, and if it gets kind of above and beyond my training, then of course I'm going to refer them on for more help elsewhere.
Very good, Marla.
Yeah.
We speak the same language. I've been practicing for over 34 years. I love to do integrative medicine. There are patients who are going to need medication, but I discuss the holistic approach, just as you laid out. Nutrition is the most important disease modifying agent.
Mhm.
If we don't eat well, then we will have problems. And of course, as you mentioned, exercise is medicine, sleep is medicine. I also invite my patients to go to bed early, before 12. Between 10 and 12, that's when we have all the metabolic hormones are released. That's when patients need to be in bed so that the tissues can be repaired,
Uh-huh. Mhm.
and of course, as you mentioned, movement, exercise, stress management. A lot of patients have the high cortisol level because of stress
Right.
that dumps on fat in the areas that they don't need fat. That leads to the insulin resistance, and we have a cycle. So I thank you so much for coming on to share your experience. And I'm sure that someone will be listening and they will be learning about what they need to change. I also want to introduce I have an app right now. It's a holistic approach, holistic medicine. It's called My Best Health Pal. You can take a look at it, Marla. So you can, recommend it to some of your patients.
Awesome.
The same approach is there. Nutrition, exercise, meditation, stress management, sleep videos, everything is on that app to encourage people to change their lifestyle, change various habits that will lead to better health. So it was really nice having you. And before we leave, are there any parting words you want to give before we leave?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I would say if you're looking to make one change in your life right now, there's, the green smoothie is great, adding flaxseed is great. But the one thing I would say would be to set aside an hour each week for planning time. If we're not looking at how busy our week is, if we're not picking a few recipes, making the grocery list, getting that shopping done, then we know we get really busy and this next week will be the same as last week. So
Yeah.
let's allow that time. And I think that's one of the biggest changes, most important changes that people can make that would be helpful going forward. And I'd like to say too, if anybody wants to look at my website, marlaablon.com, please feel free to take a look. People can email me at marlaablon@sbcglobal.net. And if anybody wants to email me, I'll send you a little handout on common nutrition myths that you can take a look at. Otherwise, Dr. Cooper, it's been a real pleasure meeting with you today.
It was just fantastic having you to hear you talk about your story and what you're doing to impact others who may have similar problems or different problems.
That's right.
It is very important to teach and educate. So I want to thank you for joining with me today, and I hope to have you back in the future.
Well, thank you. I love that.
So God bless you, and until then, Dr. Cooper from Get Healthy with Dr. Cooper podcast, and Continue watching us and learning more if you really want to impact your health and follow. And you're going to learn much to improve your health and to live a happy and longer life. Thank you, Marla. We'll see you again soon.
Take care.